Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diablo to D&D. My name is David, and today we're going to be going over the changelog for June 29th. I have not done a changelog since before Vegas, so 2 months? I think May. Yeah, it was like start of May, it's the end of June, about 2 months. And it is a full one today. So, starting off for the Warlock, Hex Bane now clarifies the creature is affected by Bane as long as it is under the effect of your Hex. Again, for the Warlock, Levitation Mastery also ignores the heavy property of weapons. The heavy property had changed between 5.0 and 5.5, so I just kind of pulled it out as well. The original one said you can't use it unless you have a strength of such and such and such. But since you're using your charisma for levitation mastery, it doesn't make sense that heavy weapons can't be lifted. A couple of items. The Angelic Halo's max hit point increase has been moved to the 2-piece set bonus, and its additional healing now works with any healing instead of only spending hit dice. A little bit of a buff. Well, kind of. Now you need 2 items instead of just the 1. The 3+ items Angelic Raiment set bonus now checks the number of unique Angelic Raiment items rather than the total number. I realized that if you had, say, 2 of the same item, then technically you could get additional bonuses because you are tuned to 2 or more of the same, 2 or more items of the set. So now it checks for the unique number. For the playtest as a whole, references to the sorceress has been changed to the sorcerer to reflect Diablo as a whole. I originally had sorceress because that's what Diablo 2 has as their character, but I realized in Diablo 1 they're using the sorcerer, not sorceress. So the Diablo 2 sorceress was more of a flavor thing rather than an actual thing. A couple of changes to the systems. Rapiers now have 3 maximum sockets instead of 4. This was a bit of a nerf. I realized that rapiers are pretty small, relatively. And so having 4 sockets instead of 3 would make... or 3 sockets instead of 4 would make more sense. I could go back and change that depending on how I'm feeling. I've been on a rune word kick recently, and I've been analyzing the number of sockets, so that one could be a change that gets undone. Also for systems, but a different system, the table to determine which affixes charms have has been moved from a D100 to a D4. For some more changes to items, the Angelic Sickle, Arcana's Flesh, and Arctic Furs and Arctic Horn now require 2 or more unique items from their respective sets in order to get their upgraded effects. I think this was very similar to what I said earlier, where I needed to check the unique items rather than the total number of items. Also for items, Arcana's Death Wand can now be used as an arcane focus by anyone attuned to it. Slight buff. For the Warlock, Levitation Mastery now allows you to wield 2-handed weapons in one hand only as long as your other hand is free or holds a light weapon or arcane focus. This somewhat matches the update to the Warlock, where you cannot wield a shield and a 2-handed weapon. You have to be wielding an offensive item and a 2-handed weapon. For spells, Summon Hellion's Defiler Form's Soulbind now has a range and clarifies the triggering damage cannot be damage from Soulbind. So it doesn't stack with itself, is what it is. Also, forgetting to clarify the range. Yeah, very important. More changes to the Warlock. Demonic Mastery removes advantage and disadvantage from attack rolls made with disadvantage instead of granting advantage on all attack rolls. So this is actually a nerf. Instead of granting advantage on all attack rolls, it instead brings up the bottom rather than the bottom and the ceiling. For the Warlock, Blood Boil and Engorge now say a fiend under your control rather than a creature summoned with Find Familiar or Summon Hellion, and bind demon's text granting benefits from your warlock abilities to the bound demon has been removed. For the warlock, again, Blood Oath, Demonic Mastery, Death Mark, and Consumes requirements now refer to the ability to summon a fiend instead of referencing Summon Hellion or the Dominion of Chains, and their abilities refer to fiends under your control instead of creatures summoned with Find Familiar or Summon Hellion. All this right here allows you to use other fiends from other spells. Summon Demon, Summon Lesser Demon, Summon Greater Demon. Those kinds of spells now allow you to get benefits, those abilities that I mentioned here now grant benefits to those fiends summoned by those spells. Because the Warlock is summoning, fiends, summoning and binding fiends. So now you can get it with any spell. Also, if you have Find Familiar from a different source and you pick it, or pick the Fiend option, that would also work there. For systems, set items now must be worn or wielded in order to gain their benefits. Kind of a duh. Just clarifying in the set items section. A bunch of changes to items. Immortal King's Soul Cage is now very rare instead of rare, and the Immortal King's Stone Crusher is now legendary instead of very rare. Bit of a nerf there. For more items, Soulflay has been reworked to modern design standards, dealing 1d4 force damage on a critical strike and healing the wielder by that much, instead of adding a modified additional attack. Soulflay was like one of the first one or two items that I actually made, and then as I have grown and changed as a designer, I went back and retweaked it. So now it actually, works. Sunder Charms are now known as Latent Sunder Charms. This was changed to bring them in line with modern design for Diablo 2, where you have Latent and Awoken, or Renewed. That's what it is, Renewed Sunder Charms. Those will be coming much later. For items, gem quality has been removed and the abilities have been modified and rebalanced. This is what I did last week. I think it was last week, where I took away the gem qualities because they were causing so many problems, and now just made them 1 gem quality. Again, for that same video for systems, Gem Shrine's ability has been reworked to enchant gems instead of producing or upgrading them. For items, Gem's armor benefits now also work in helms. Forgot to put that in there because the benefits in helms and armor is the same. For items, battle gauntlets are now referred to as Katars. This one I just pulled the trigger. It's a naming change. Battle gauntlet was a little nebulous, so now it's just call it what it is. Call a spade, only this time it's a, Katar. And then here are a bunch of changes to sockets. Sickles now have a maximum of 3 sockets instead of 2. So, fun fact, daggers in Diablo 2 have either 1 socket or 3 sockets. A maximum of either 1 socket or 3 sockets. And what I've decided is that they should have a maximum of 2. Which means that the 3 rune words made specifically for daggers can't be used. However, I have classified sickles under the same category as daggers. They share a lot of the same properties. And yes, I know sickles aren't the same as daggers. I know. I've been obsessing over weapons since I was a kid. I know that they're different. But this does, 1, give sickles a little bit more use because they're largely a forgotten weapon. But 2, sickles are also used by necromancers, especially with Diablo 3. They have a lot of sickles that they use, kind of as this reaping theme. And so giving sickles the ability to have 3 sockets opens them up to being more useful. And yeah, when you look at daggers, we don't tend to think of daggers like big daggers. Those tend to get, start stepping on the territory of like short swords mechanically. So instead having sickles be akin to daggers would be very nice. All right, let's just move on. Maces now have a maximum of 3 sockets instead of 4. This one was a change to kind of get this progression of bludgeoning weapons so that you have like a club at 2, spoilers, club at 2, mace at 3, and then a flail and a morning star, which is piercing damage, but whatever, at 4. Yes, I know flails in Diablo 2 have a maximum of 5 sockets. I might do another video explaining my logic for why each one of those weapons have the number of sockets that they do. And again, like I said, with the rapier being 3 sockets instead of 4, I might change that. Okay, let's move on. Repeating crossbows now have a maximum of 5 sockets instead of 4. This was to kind of bridge the gap between the short bow, which has 4 sockets, and the heavy crossbow, which has 6. The repeating crossbow being a 5 socket means that you can actually you have a little bit more variety in the kind of ranged weapons that you're using for your rune words. As a side note, I had originally, when I typed this up, I had originally dropped the repeating crossbow from a D8 down to a D6 in damage, but I realized that the light crossbow has a D8 damage, but the loading property. The short bow has a D6 damage, but no loading property. Because the repeating crossbow is a martial weapon without the without the loading property, I considered dropping it down to a D6, but then I realized again it's a martial weapon, and so it's going to be restricted, so I can bump the damage up a little bit more. For items, the Bardiche, Lockhaber Axe, and Ogre Axe are now glaives instead of halberds. I went on a deep dive into this one just to see exactly what the difference is, what exactly is a Bardiche, because I saw that Blumenek on YouTube, the pole dancing archer. It makes sense when you look at it. Just go check out his channel, link up in the top right. He got a Bardiche, and that thing is a polearm that is short. I mean, when we think of a polearm, they are like usually 6 to 8 feet, 10 feet long for like a pike. But a Bardiche, at least the one that he had, is pretty short relatively. But it's also because of the blade length. Halberds are a kind of tri-weapon where they have a weapon on one side, on the other side, and on the top. Whereas glaives tend to really only have a weapon on the top that you can stab with and then cut with on one side and then either hook or redirect on the back end. So the Bardiche, it's a glaive now. And then lastly for the systems, clubs now have a maximum of 2 sockets instead of 3, like I mentioned earlier in the video. And that's pretty much it. Oh my gosh, I have been agonizing over this, when to do this changelog for a couple weeks now. And then my computer decided that it didn't want to charge, so I have been freaking out over that, and now, ta-da, I'm running out of time to make a video, so here's a changelog. Well, I think that is going to be it, so thank you very much for watching. You can contact me at XenosFan2, that is XENOZFAN2 on Blue Sky and Reddit. And you can contact the channel directly at Diablo TODND on Blue Sky and YouTube. Thank you much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good whatever.